Today in Trek Wars, we're going to learn about the Federation survey ship Freedom Class. It's a single-cell starship which is partially based on a blending of older technology seen on the Ambassador class and new modern technology seen on the Galaxy. The Freedom Class ships such as the USS Firebrand NCCC-68723 were in operations in the second half of the 24th century and designed to carry out tasks such as light exploration and planet survey. They were also capable of defending Federation borders and guarding supply convoys. The class was highly unusual in featuring just one warp nacelle. It did not have a separate engine hull, and its single nacelle was attached directly to the next section, which in turn supported the saucer module. The nacelle was very similar in appearance to those on Galaxy-class ships, while the next section appeared to have been taken from the late 23rd century Constellation class. The saucer utilizes a very rare design, overall and somewhat flattered in shape. The only other type of starship this was seen on was the Niagara class. This is a modified version of the Ambassador saucer. Now, the Shuttle Bay location, because the Freedom Class ship had no engineering hull, the Shuttle Bay was represented underneath the main bridge at the center of the saucer section. In 2367, the U.S. Firebrand was part of a fleet assembled by Admiral J.P. Hansen to attempt to block a Borg cube that had invaded the Alpha Quadrant and was on its way to assimilate Earth. All hands were lost with the engagement against the Borg. Now, some interesting facts about the ship is despite having only one nacelle, the Freedom-class vessels were still able to reach a top speed of warp 9.2 for limited periods. However, if for some reason the nacelle became inoperable, the ship would only be capable of impulse speed. Now, some other interesting things about this ship that is unique only to this ship is its configuration with its warp nacelle. So the warp nacelle itself is actually being configured to be holding a navigational deflector. So as you can see, the navigational deflector dish is rather small. So this would limit the sensory capabilities of this ship. But for its primary role, it's not really that necessary. Now remember, this ship would only be traveling around local systems and doing patrol duty. So not having a very powerful navigation deflector dish would be really hard for a ship that's actually exploring and is an explorer like the Galaxy. But this ship doesn't have to worry about that. That's not its profile, it's not its duty, so it doesn't really affect the ship's performance. Remember, this ship is in local space and it's doing survey duties, maybe collecting minerals, things of that nature. This is a patrol ship in local borders. So it's not the fastest ship. It does have, high level warp, but it's very limited. So this ship is only operating or meant to operate in local space. So let's take a moment, let's look at one of the unique structures. Underneath the saucer section is this large module, which is referred to as a phaser cannon. Now, this is used for destroying asteroids and things of that nature for doing supply runs. So this ship would actually go into known asteroids in Federation space, would actually use this cutting beam to cut the asteroids up and then bring the raw materials back to shipyards for constructions of other ships. So not only is the ship doing, defensive duties, and it's also doing supply runs, but it's actually somewhat of a cargo ship in a way. So it's going to cut those asteroids, tractor beam them, and then bring them back to wherever they need to bring them to. Now, it is also noted some variants of the Freedom-class starships, instead of opting for the phase cannon, they will actually replace the phase cannon with a more powerful sensor system to make up for the poor navigational deflector system that this ship unfortunately uses. Let's take a look at the offensive capabilities of this light cruiser that's used for patrol. So the Freedom's crew is 370. Its length is 430. It has a mass of 2,169,000. It has one Lance phaser. It has 8 Type 9 phasers, and it has 2 photon torpedo tubes. Its shields are 1,040,000. Its hull is 812,359. Has a full defense of 1,525,000. So, taking a look at its armament, we can tell that this ship is not a warship. This ship is basically just for patrol. It's got what we would refer to as medium class weaponry and medium class shields. So, the shields aboard this ship are about half of what you would see on a Galaxy class. The weapons systems aboard this ship are somewhat par. They have 2 old Fulton torpedo tubes located on the vessel, only able to fire front, and the ship itself is using Type 9 phasers. Type 9 phasers are somewhat of a lower generation weaponry quality than a Type 8 phaser. So a Type 8 phaser is used for military purposes. Type 9 phasers are more of a run-of-the-mill weapon that is in between the Type 8 and then the weapon full-on defensive capabilities of a Type 10 phaser. To give you an understanding of what I'm talking about, Type 9 phasers are around 20,000 terawatts of damage. A Type 8 phaser hits for about 30 to 35,000 terawatts of damage. And then a Type 10 phaser is going to hit for 65,000 terawatts of damage. So one of the things that's really apparent about this ship is it's not really intended for actual ship-to-ship combat. It's more or less there as a detour for commercial ships like raiders and things of that nature. So this thing was probably designed with the idea of fighting off like Maquis raiders or things of that nature. So this is an anti-raider starship, and it's never meant to take on cruisers or even battleships or anything of that nature. Now the ship does have shuttlecrafts, but it's very limited, and it's right underneath the bridge, which you can see here. So this ship, like I said, it's a lower class starship built for mass production. There's nothing particularly great about this ship, and it's subpar at just about everything. But this ship is relatively small and cheap and easy to build. So to get an understanding why the Federation would build a ship of this class in the first place is simple. It's logistics, it's numbers. If you look at the size of this ship, it is significantly smaller than the Ambassador, and it is way smaller than the Galaxy. This ship's size comparison and ratio is more equivalent to that of an Excelsior class starship, but it doesn't play the same role as an Excelsior. An Excelsior is a defensive deep space engagement battleship. This ship is designed to fill a niche of local system needs, and the Federation is absolutely massive, and they need lots of ships. So this ship is cheap and easy to produce, and as far as functionality, it's pretty moderate for just about everything that it does. Though it's not great and it doesn't specialize in anything, it's still decent enough to do most jobs efficiently. When evaluating this starship, and you want to put it into a category compared to something, based on its weaponry and its shielding, this ship is equivalent or almost equal to actually an Excelsior class. Though an Excelsior class is actually faster and is able to go deep space and is able to hold warp speeds longer than this ship, as far as its defensive capabilities, it's about equivalent to that of an Excelsior class starship. Alright, so now let's talk about its role during the Dominion War. So this ship was not really seen on the front lines during the Dominion War. What the Federation has found is that Lance Phaser was really good at taking out installations, because one of these ships did engage the Borg and used that Lance Phaser on the Borg and did significant damage. So that Lance Phaser is capable of delivering a huge amount of damage, though the ship has to be stationary when using it. So it was good for taking out planetary structures, like planetary defense systems or space stations, or even massive capital ships that are slow and easy to target. So this ship was very effective in its role in Starfleet during the Dominion War, and it did use its not intended, weapon, phase cannon, for that purpose. So it was a long-range, basically artillery ship. Instead of torpedoes, though, being a torpedo frigate, it was using that Lance phaser. And when you got into close combat, it could handle a Jem'Hadar fighter on its own, and it could take out a Galor on its own as well. But if you got more than one or two Dominion fighters, this ship would probably struggle, especially since it's not particularly that maneuverable. And another thing to mention about it is it's only got two forward-facing torpedo tubes, so its firepower is very limited once you get to the rear of the ship. It doesn't particularly have the greatest firing arcs, and there's this negative space behind the engine that Jem'Hadar fighters could utilize to somewhat get out of its firing arcs. So when you look at the perspective of Starfleet and why that they were using this ship to start supplementing and replacing their Excelsiors, is because the Excelsior's primary goal is combat, and everything else is secondary. So this other ship, this Freedom class, is cheap, easy to produce, and is not great at anything, but is good at just about everything. So it's a multi-purpose, multi-role starship capable of doing more roles and more things than just exploration and combat. So I really want to emphasize that the multi-role of this ship was the idea of replacing a lot of the other ships, because the Freedom could do, just about everything moderately, but not fantastic at anything. So yes, it could give a decent amount of defense. It could have a decent amount of cargo. The ship itself is around the same size as an Excelsior, but it's actually cheaper to produce than the Excelsior. So the Excelsior's primary goal is combat, but if you could send a Freedom to replace its duties of, escorting or bringing supplies or something like that, it would free up the Excelsior to go to a more, dangerous war zone. Okay, so let's do a comparative analysis. So we obviously can see that the Freedom benefits from, some newer technology. It has better shielding. And so overall its defensive value is higher, but only slightly higher than the Excelsior. But the Excelsior severely outguns, and the Excelsior we're looking at is a Kirk-era Excelsior. So it has anywhere between 12 to 14 Type 8 phasers aboard it and 4 full-ton torpedoes. On the other hand, we were looking at our Freedom. It's got 8 phaser Type 9s and 2 standard full-ton torpedo tubes. So you can see that it would be much more beneficial to send the Excelsior to a high combat zone rather than the Freedom. So the Freedom it does two things. It's helping with supplies and logistics, and it's also giving the opportunity to replace other ships, taking their role and letting more, let's say, offensive starships go onto the borders or do other duties in order to relieve them of those functionality. So the Freedom is an unusual class, but it serves a special niche in Starfleet's role, and a very interesting one. Now, one of the things I learned about this ship that I did not know is I misunderstood the size of the vessel. The ship is literally about the same size as an Excelsior. The saucer section is not the same as a Ambassador class. It's actually much smaller than an Ambassador class. It's almost half, which was interesting because I thought it was an Ambassador class with just, rigged up to a Galaxy engine, but I was mistaken. And researching it, it was one of the things I found that was really interesting. The ship is actually much smaller than I thought, and it literally is a light cruiser. That's all it is. It's just a light cruiser. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the Freedom. I hope you guys learned something new. If you guys something I missed or you want to share, please share with the team. So as you can see, take a look at it. It's right there in the middle. It's a pretty small ship. Yeah, it's about the same size as the Excelsior. Did you guys find anything new or find anything interesting about the ship? I mean, overall, I think it's a pretty interesting ship. I like the lore. I think the design is unique and kind of cool. It's definitely an oddball. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And with that being said, I will see you in the future.